24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the home stretch of the U.S. presidential election, the final countdown after the third and final presidential debate. With us to talk about it, Caith KUSHNER and Forrest ALOGNA. Caith and Forrest work for the same law firm. Caith, Republican, Forrest, a Democrat. Let's forget all this arguing about the presidential election. Who's the better lawyer?
Forrest.
Okay. Also with us is from Florida, longtime New York Times correspondent, Joe TREASTER with the University of Miami School of Communication. Joe, what are your students going to be doing, by the way, on election night?
We've got a huge project on election day. Our students are going to go out, maybe 50 or 60 of them, to polling places. They'll be interviewing voters, writing, photographing, and videography projects. All to contribute to a national project involving 16 universities. It originates in Syracuse University, and here we'll be publishing our material on the MiamiPlanet.org, environmental publication that I edit, but which has a good reach in more than 60 countries. And we think the election's a big enough topic, though, even though the environment has hardly gotten into the election process. It's going to be a good chance for our student reporters to get out and exercise those muscles. And I think we're going to really have some good insights for voters. And when you put together what we find and get out into the internet era, and with the other universities, I think we're going to have a very nice package. And all right. I hope we'll be checking back with you on that.
I hope so as well, and that'll be on the MiamiPlanet.org website. Also with us, Iranian attorney Ardavan AMIR-ASLANI and Anne BAGAMERY of the International Herald Tribune. A couple of comments from the France 24 debate Facebook page I wanted to read to you. Anne Bruno from Nantes saying, even though both have the same attitude on the Middle East and principally Israel, it's well comprehensible that despite the disappointment that Obama may have caused, he's still the best to deal with the region, while Moses in Malawi says it's a game, a race that each candidate longs to win, but Mitt seems to be the more pragmatic. And Eric says it's not the job of the U.S. president to sort out the Middle East. That was the question we put to them on the Facebook page. What a presumptuous question. It's that attitude which has spawned so many foreign policy problems, in addition to misspent resources and the hyper-interventionist outlook that is now so widespread among policy makers. It's a tough one when you're running for U.S. president, because last night we had a debate on Lebanon, and people were asking, why isn't the U.S. doing more?
Well, you know, we're back to the question of what is America's role in the world and how can it best exert, if you like, the more positive aspects of being the only superpower left without falling into any of the negative traps. There have been some terrific books and articles written by correspondents with long history in the region who talk about America modeling good governance, transparency, the values of democracy. There are a lot of people who think that the best way to do that is to just go into a country and say, all right, you guys need democracy, you need women's rights, you need free speech, and you need freedom of religion, and you need it all right now. There are plenty of commentators and reporters who've spent time in the region who say that is just never, ever going to work. And what's interesting is that I think one of the things, having said all the negative things I did about the debate last night, one thing that all of these debates have shown is two very different visions of America, two very different plans and paths for the country. And I suppose it's not that surprising in a way that each side has its own adherents. But it is such a stark contrast between the way the Obama administration in its second term would continue to conduct America's business abroad and the way a Romney administration would change that. It's so striking after three debates, and especially after the one last night.
Princeton political scientist Anne-Marie Slaughter, blogging for the New York Times, wrote that this really wasn't a debate about foreign policy or world affairs. It was the projection of the American electoral map onto the globe. All discussion of Israel and Islam was targeted at Florida. All discussion of China was targeted at Ohio. We can only hope the rest of the world wasn't listening. Well, bad news on that score. The rest of the world, it seems, was listening.
Any political party in the United States should look at China's development.
in a rational and objective way, and do more to contribute to China-US cooperation and mutual trust with a responsible attitude. This also conforms to US interests.
Ardavan, AMIR-ASLANI, is there really going to be any fallout out of the Chinese? They know this is all just a campaign, no?
No, I think the Chinese understand that there's a big difference between two candidates. You see, when I listen to Romney, the image that I get is that of someone who's stuck in the Reagan era. And the president, I think, is right when he talks about a return to the 80s. You see, there is a big confusion in America whereby people think that it is sufficient for a strong Republican candidate to be inaugurated as president so as for everyone in the Middle East to panic and free the hostages. It's not going to work that way. This time it's different. We should not forget that Romney belongs to the same political party that brought in tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers into Afghanistan and into Iraq for the results that we can witness today. The president is taking out the American troops out of Afghanistan, and basically the idea is get back the keys to the Taliban. That's how bad the fiasco of this involvement was. And the Chinese, they look at this election with a lot of amusement because there is a big issue over here. China is about Pakistan, is about the nuclear issue in Pakistan. America is about India, which is a democracy compared to Pakistan, and democracy per se. And all of these regional geostrategic issues will be modified and will suffer impacts depending upon who will be elected. Obama, it's important to understand that, is hope for the region. I don't know of any actor in power or in the opposition in the entire Middle East or Pakistan or India that will look at Romney as someone who's going to bring hope for the future. They see him as someone who's going to bring in excitement, exaggeration, and an aggressive attitude to the local populations. That is something that is not welcome over there. And China over here is basically worried because they see in Romney someone who's going to be the finger pointer to the currency manipulator, finger pointer to the lack of the U.S. military presence in the Pacific, pointing at the lack of battleships that America has. That's not true. America is the only country in today's world that has actually functioning and operational aircraft carriers. 10 of them, 11 of them. France is the only other power with only one that is not operational ever since the Libyan affair. So let's look at the matters on the ground with the required decency and innocence and identify Obama as the only possible option, not only for America and the return of America to the world, but also the region. America is important.
Very briefly on that, Caith.
What is Barack Obama's strategy to deal with the rise of China and their development of weapons that threaten our naval and air resources in the Pacific? That's brief response. That's it. We don't have leadership in this administration.
And Romney's?
Yeah, it'll be more than this. He's willing to say these guys aren't playing fair. They're not playing by the rules, and we're going to work with our allies to let them know we're there.
What's the plan? What's the plan?
I mean, you saw.
I'm just asking as a journalist because you need the follow-up question. It's all very well to have a 10-word answer in a debate. It sounds great, but you need to ask, what are the next 10 words?
Right. The words are deal with them as they are and not just be afraid of them. And not just say, okay, we're not going to call you a currency manipulator because we're afraid it would make you upset. I mean,
I'm going to channel Martha
is
Raddatz, no specifics.
That we're an increasingly multilateral world where the United States no longer has the resources that it once had. At one and the same time, Mr. Romney wants to solve the debt problem, create jobs, and carry a big stick with China. And the reality is you can't have it all anymore. The world is.
Hang on a sec. Is that politically astute to say that? You know, the old adage that a blunder is when a politician tells the truth. Saying that it's a multilateral world and that the U.S. can't carry the can. When you're heading into the home stretch of a U.S. presidential election, do you want to speak in soft and reasoned tones in that matter?
I certainly don't speak for President Obama, but I think among us and among voters who are deciding whether or not to vote for one candidate or the other, they need to look reality in the face. Clearly, President Obama hasn't been as frank as I just have been, but I think if you're really thinking about the choices, it's clear that we can't afford another 10 battleships.
All right, let's look ahead just to before we go at where things go over the next 2 weeks. Obama ahead in the electoral vote count, but by a sliver. He could even lose the popular vote, say some, and win the election. And after the Democratic convention, before the first debate, there was, remember, at the time, talk of Romney pulling out of some states. Now there's a lot of them that are still in play, and it's very close. A lot of those toss-up states, as you can see on that map, are within the so-called margin of error. Let's get the truth now on the water cooler chatter at your law firm here. Forrest, are you nervous?
I've always been nervous. Since 2004, when Bush won that election to my great astonishment.
But do you think Obama, by virtue of his performance in the first debate, do you think he may have, the pendulum swing that started to go the other way, that he may have blown it?
I'm not sure if it was the first debate. I think a lot of us have done some soul searching, and certainly he didn't perform as well as many of us would have liked. At the same time, the two candidates have gone back and forth a great deal over the last 9 months. If you look at the long term, and it had been, Obama had been a little bit ahead following the convention, but my view is that there are very few swing voters who are really in play, and that it's interesting for journalists, and that creates news to focus on the differences at the margins. But I don't think that single debate made a key difference in the election.
And could the pendulum now be swinging the other way after those two other debates?
No, I don't think so. I think the more time that Obama and Romney spent side by side, the more you saw lofty rhetoric. Obama, we've been seeing it for 4 years. It is what it is. And you see Romney, side by side, Romney being more of a managerial style, more of a CEO type person. And you think, okay, well, the economy is not doing great. The country is not doing great. Do I want this rhetoric, which I've been hearing over and over, and it's very nice, or do I want someone, is this someone I can see being the CEO of the country, so to speak?
All right, let's get Joe Treaster in on this. Joe, I want to ask you about politics in Florida. The latest polls, very tight over there. It's one of those swing states. In fact, it's the biggest one in terms of electoral votes. What's going to swing the election in your state?
It's as muddy here as it is across the country. I would love to see some space developing between the two. We've been, I don't know, a couple of weeks now, stuck pretty close together, and I don't think in order to get the Hispanic vote or the vote with sentiments in Latin America that either candidate's really going to have to talk very much about that issue. The region doesn't like being neglected. It is often neglected, but I think the Hispanic vote is as interested in the economy as anybody else. I think probably Obama may have scored a few points more than Romney last night with our Jewish vote here, where we must have at least 100,000 Jewish voters. But then we have 100,000 from Venezuela, 200,000 from Mexico. It's a really international city. It's hard to see what's going to make them break away. The debates didn't do it. It's hard also to tell how troubled or how worried people are about the actual personalities of the two candidates. I do hear over and over concerns about the lack of international experience on Romney's part and his kind of CEO gruffness, which may not work out so well in international affairs. But, I try as I might to get around, read everything I can. I think I'm hearing a lot of Democratic echoes. Very hard to get a clear picture.
All right, back in 2000, the world watched the presidential election play out over weeks. It was your state of Florida. In the end, the U.S. Supreme Court making the final call, refusing a recount. George W. Bush winning that election. When you look at the poll numbers this time around, a lot of focus has been on Ohio. There's been confusion there over their early voting system. Some predicting even a battle royale between rival attorneys if it's tight. We have 3 of them on the set. But I'm going to put the question to Anne BAGAMERY. Do you expect Ohio to be the new Florida this time around?
I don't expect anything. The news reports coming out about the way the voting is being conducted, and especially about who's supplying the voting machines, should trouble anybody who wants to see this as a fair process. And, you know, when you start thinking about the American elections and you start thinking about democracy,
you say about who's supplying the voting machines?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that it's a company that's backed or owned by Tag Romney.
His son.
His son. So I think that there have been questions raised about whether that's not an inherent conflict of interest, given that his father is one of the candidates. So, you know, anytime you're reading about something like that, and given the history in America of problems at the voting booth, I think it's a legitimate question to raise. Now, any campaign worth its salt is going to have lawyers lined up waiting to challenge any very, very close states. It's just the way it works. So you know that the Obama campaign has that. You know that the Romney campaign has it. How many swing states are there? There are probably enough lawyers in the United States to have a full team from each campaign at each of those courthouses for November 7th if there's anything to be contested.
All right, so the possibility of a late night all around. There's been untold amounts of money, broken all the records. There's a polarized America, as we've been saying in our discussion. Is the acrimony just going to get a lot worse during this recount?
If there is a recount, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I certainly hope that we can move towards a centrist view. I think the good news in the way the discourse has moved in the current campaign is certainly we've seen Romney move very far to the center, and I think that was one of the things that put Obama on his back foot for the first debate, was in fact being a bit surprised that Romney had come so far to the center.
And we're out of time. Just in one word, will it be close on election night?
Yes.
Will it be close?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll be covering it, of course, right here on France 24, our coverage throughout election day and election night, depending where you are. I want to thank Anne BAGAMERY. I also want to thank Ardavan AMIR-ASLANI, Caith KUSHNER, and Forrest ALOGNA, and for joining us from the University of Miami. Joe TREASTER, thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thanks very much.